all those in the police, the social services and government who've done this should be in prison, but at the minimum they should lose their jobs and their pensions. Let's be aware here that the Labour Party was glove in hand with not only the Muslim lobby in those areas, but in many cases the Muslim rapists themselves, some of whom were actually Labour Party activists who were involved here.
And that is a similar picture across Europe that we found when we made that documentary, that high rates of Afghanistani people, Pakistani people and Indian people, and then some aspects of Eastern European like Romanians and Albanians were very high in sexual assault and rape. So it's this data doesn't really come as a surprise. It's the picture of Europe, actually, not just here.
There's been a quadrupling of rape in this country in the last 10 years, which has mirrored the rise of the immigrant population. And in places like Paris, 77% of crimes and sex crimes in Paris, we know, are also foreign nationals. The greatest scandal of the 21st century and the greatest scandal of the 21st century requires a proper national inquiry, not a time-limited inquiry, which Dame Casey has said. This should be a multi-year inquiry, so all of these aspects can be really dealt with and nothing can be just skirted over, because I think it needs a thorough deep dive into all of these.
Whereas we're now where, as I say, if a woman has a DIY abortion, a day before she is due, that's allowed, and it's shocking. It's, to me, it's just murder. It's a baby that could live outside of the womb.
Hello and welcome to Newspeak. I'm Peter Whittle, and with me, as usual, is Rafe Hadelmanku, our Senior Fellow and Moral Historian, and Amy Gallagher, regular on this show, also from Stand Up to Woke. Before we look at the various, extremely important issues of this week, Rafe, you've got something to impart on the locals front.
Yes, so even though it's summer, there's no let-up with our locals events, so do come out and join us if you live in or around any of these places. On June the 21st, there'll be a visit to the National Gallery in London. 24th of June in Dorset, 25th of June in Beaconsfield with Catherine McBride, who's a Brexiteer economist. The 28th in Edinburgh, 30th in West London, and also there'll be the NCF Book Club on the 30th. 1st of July, Southampton. 2nd of July in Cambridge. The question they'll be discussing is, what is the future of the Tory party, with the chair of the Cambridge Tory Association. On the 12th in Southampton, there'll be an event, What the Heck is Going On in Britain? I think we all are wondering that, with a number of speakers there, Stephen Barrett, Jeff Taylor, Charlie Downs, and Lawrence Pathis. 12th and 13th will be in Carlisle and in Birmingham for the second birthday, and our very own Peter Whittle and Philip Kisley will be there. So if you are in or around any of those places, they're all free of charge. Please do email locals@newcultureforum.org.uk. It's a great way to meet other people as well as enjoy the summer.
Rafe, sorry, can I just go back on one of those? It was a discussion, is it what the heck is going on in the country? Is that right?
Yes, what the heck is going on in Britain?
And it's a discussion with a number of different people.
So Stephen Barrett, Jeff Taylor, Charlie Downs, who of course has been on your show, Whittle, not so long ago, and deprogrammed, and Lawrence Pathis.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Very, very encouraging, isn't it? It's brilliant. At the very beginning of the week, obviously, we had the publication of Louise Casey's report into Grooming Gangs. And because of the things it was going to say, basically the government decided to head it off at the pass and announce what was a national inquiry. A major U-turn, from Starmer on this front. But with this inquiry, this is very important, there seems to be some kind of confusion about what it's meant to be, what its kind of terms of reference are. Most inquiries actually go on for something like 3 years and cost a fortune and everything. And most people, I think you'd agree, don't they sort of say, oh, God, it's just fobbing people off, national inquiry, blah, blah. I think this one is terribly important if it's done right. If it's actually done in the same way that, for example, the Post Office inquiry was done, which actually did lead to something. What do you think, Amy, what would you say we should get out of this? What is the number one thing we should get out of this?
Well, I'd like people to be held accountable. That we had at the moment, nobody's lost their job, nobody's gone to prison. You know, in terms of social workers, people in government, people in councils, police officers who covered this up. We know that there's been literal cover-ups of, the word Pakistani being Tipexed out of reports and so on. So we need people to be named, I think, and I'm concerned that might not happen, but I think that's very important. And I'd like it to look into. I don't think it would do this either, but a lot has been expressed this week about ethnicity. But I'd also like religion and culture to be looked at.
Right, of course.
We know that Muslims were predominantly carrying out these crimes. Will that be looked into? I don't know. But definitely, why wasn't the data kept around ethnicity and race? In some police areas it was being kept, and in some places it wasn't. Was it deliberate? We know that when a perpetrator was white, their ethnicity was noted, but when they weren't, it wasn't. So things like that there needs to be accountability with these issues, and we need something kind of put in place so that can't happen again. That's the kind of thing I'd want.
I think the thing is that when you say about people, basically being called to account, put in prison if needs be, we're not talking about perpetrators as such. This is the thing, is that from what I've been reading, you can hear, I think even what Starmer said, which was this, we're going to make sure that these people who've done these terrible things are, face the full force of the law. It's not actually what we're talking about, is essentially the establishment, the components of the establishment in all their different particular guises, isn't it, Rafe? Civil servants, as you say, social workers, right up.
To make no mistake, the Labour Party did not want this national inquiry for one primary reason, because it would shine a light on the venalism, on the corruption, on the fraud, on the shocking behaviour of Labour-run councils in Rochdale, Rotherham, the north of England. Let's be aware here that the Labour Party was glove in hand with not only the Muslim lobby in those areas, but in many cases the Muslim rapists themselves, some of whom were actually Labour Party activists who were involved here. And people need to understand that the Labour Party was in the north of England was so beholden to this Muslim vote. And they said to the Muslims, you know what, only we can look after your interests. The Tories won't do it. There's no point voting for independent Muslim campaigners because they don't have the power. We have the power to look after you. And in exchange for offering that, they were getting postal votes. There were Muslims were going around door by door to local Muslim communities where people didn't even speak the language. They had ordered the postal vote. They would just sign them. The postal votes were blank, and huge batches of these postal votes were signed off fraudulently for Labour MPs. This, of course, was alleged by Raja Mia, who you've had on your show, Whittle, a great whistleblower. And this is 19th century pre-Great Reform Act levels of corruption, the rotten boroughs. They are alive and well. And through all of this discussion, we've had hours of discussion about the rape gangs. This aspect has not been explored enough. And that's what I really want. One of there are three pillars I want from this review. One, a deep dive into the culture and the religion that causes these people to commit these rapes, not just against white girls, primarily white girls, but also against Hindus and Sikhs, against non-Muslims. A lot of this is linked to Muhammad. Muhammad led the perfect life. Muhammad, when he was in war scenarios, would murder the men and he would rape the women. And many of these characters think that they are in a warlike footing and they have no respect for non-Muslims. That needs to be exposed as the virulent atrocity it really is. Secondly, as you said, full exposure of the politicians, the social services, the governments, the civil service, and the police, West Yorkshire Police being perhaps the worst police force in the country, on how they covered it up. Combination of being petrified by political correctness, but as well the corruption, looking after their own self-interest. And the third thing I want to see out of this is compensation for the victims, and it's compensation with a fund set up where the assets of the perpetrators, those rapists, should lose their houses, they should be sold at auction. We had on our channel, we had one of the survivors of the rape gangs, and her lawyer, Robin Tilbrook, they've actually putting up her rapist house for auction. And I think all the victims should have their lives have been ruined by all this. They should get some money back. And in addition to that, all those in the police, the social services and government who've done this should be in prison, but at the minimum, they should lose their jobs and their pensions.
I think everyone will be clapping, at the end of that. What we're hearing, though, from the media is a sort of, there should be an apology. People, it's very weak, very childlike. Oh, we should hear an apology for all those people. I understand. People who tried to talk about this, called far right, I'm sure we were too, all of that, that they want to be vindicated, I understand that. But what you've just gone through there is essentially, you're talking about the state. I mean, you're talking right up to however far it goes, that this is potentially, epic in its proportions, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think people have been so demoralised by this issue that even just an apology, even though it feels like just crumbs, they're just desperate for anything, because we've had years, it's over a decade of people talking about this issue, raising this issue and being pushed down and ignored or worse, targeted or told that they're a bigot and so on. So now I think just after years of being told that you're lying or you're a racist, just to have an acknowledgement that you're not, I think for a lot of people would feel like something, even though, as you say, as Rafe just laid out, actually we need to have a really strong response to this. So this is the worst, as you always say, Peter, the most, racially aggravated crime in British history. It's so significant. And we are still seeing people, I think Baroness Casey did a very good report, but she still says, we've got to be very careful about this being used to sow, it could be used to sow division. And I'm thinking, well, there's already division. We have an entire community raping and torturing another community. If that's not division, and how are those two communities going to come back together unless you give, full, the full force of the law to the people that did it? And as Rafe said, you give compensation to the victims. And the idea that, this is a gift to real racists who will use it. Nobody is still talking about the racism that was experienced by the victims.
Yes, exactly.
When you talk about racism, there's always this idea of, we don't want to be racist to Asian people who haven't, committed crimes. And you're fine, okay. But also, do we want young white girls to still be called white slags or white this or white that? To still be made to feel like they're inferior. That's still happening now. And it amazes me that the media, that it's something in their brain that they don't think racism can happen, even though we know it has, to young white girls.
But that is a part of a political ideology,
yeah,
isn't
of course,
it?
yeah.
It absolutely cannot.
And Amy's absolutely right here. And there's another aspect to this too. One of the reasons why there is such division is because we've been shouting about this for years into a deaf wall. Nobody's been listening to us about this. The public, you saw at Southport, they get to the point of absolute frustration about what's going on in this country. If the government was man enough to do it and had just tackled these issues 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as they always say, the cover-up is worse than the act itself. Well, in this case, nothing is worse than the act, but this comes a very close second to it. And the idea, this is what really sticks in my craw, the idea that it was only on the eve of Dame Casey writing the report, publishing the report, that Keir Starmer finally realised, I find out how serious the Pakistani rape gangs are. Really? You're saying, as a public prosecutor, as leader of the opposition, as Prime Minister, only now, in the 11th hour, did you suddenly have this epiphany about it? This is it absolutely stings. It's corrupt. And the problem is, of course, I'm just scared that one of the reasons that they wanted to have local inquiries to start with is because they wanted the 10 local councils to have their own inquiries. These were councils that were at the heart of the whole thing, and they were expecting them to basically mark their own homework. So even the idea of having these local inquiries was utterly corrupt and needs to be called out for what it is. But we need, it is the greatest scandal of the 21st century, and the greatest scandal of the 21st century requires a proper national inquiry, not a time-limited inquiry, which Dame Casey has said. This should be a multi-year inquiry, so all of these aspects can be really dealt with, and nothing can be just skirted over, because I think it needs a thorough deep dive into all of these.
Sorry, she's asked for, a 3-year...
It's a time limited. I don't know how long it's going to be, how time limited, but my fear is that it won't be, it will be rushed. And these 3 things I spoke about, each one actually needs its own inquiry, really.
Now, we've been told our whole lives that wrinkle creams were the easiest way to look younger. Now, one doctor says that that's nothing but old news. According to Dr. John Lake, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing but glorified moisturizers. They hardly make a dent on your appearance, and some can even be harmful to your skin, he says. Recently, Dr. Lake has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practices. Why? Well, so he can pursue a revolutionary anti-aging breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetic industry. It's almost like Photoshop for your face. You may even be mad after seeing how easy it is to visibly erase your wrinkles from view, Lake told reporters. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the, quote, age rewinder method, because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. In light of this amazing breakthrough, Dr. Lake has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. If this helps even one person look younger or feel more confident, I'll be thrilled knowing I helped, Dr. Lake commented. The video has since gone viral. At first it was shared by users on Facebook, but since then it's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, the comments and feedback have been outstanding, with thousands of women reporting they look decades younger. One viewer even commented, "Best results of anything I've used. I can't believe how well this works. I'll never stop using this. I don't understand how it works, but the results are great. Thank you." So you can find out more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/culture or click on the link in the description box below. That's bhmd1.com/culture. Now, there is one thing Dr. Lake asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please do share it with your friends and your loved ones. Together we have the power to help as many women as possible reclaim a youthful look. Go watch the video at bhmd1.com/culture right now, or just click on the link in the description box below. The thing is, what you just mentioning there, something I've been banging on about too, is that the one and most important issue, it seems to me, not the most, but one of the most important issues, is this one of the racist selection of the victims, because they were white. This is not really being highlighted. And I think it's, basically because it really goes, really touches a nerve. It really goes against the grain.
It's taken us almost over 10 years to be able to say with this report that they were predominantly Pakistani men. You can't go against the report now. Even people on the left are saying, well, if this is the case, we've got to be careful that people aren't racist. But they're acknowledging that it was the case, that they were disproportionately Pakistani. But we still haven't got to the point where we can say they were Pakistani and they were racist. They were racist towards the white girls. That they saw them as subhuman because they were white and Western. And that is still something that we can't say, or it still cannot be acknowledged. We need to say this was a racist crime, the worst in our history.
Okay, right. We are all convinced of that. Do you feel that people care more now or not?
Well, my problem is that the legacy media are still doing everything they can to try to deflect attention away from this. You had the appalling Sheila Fogarty on LBC radio saying, well, what gets me? People are so irate about these Pakistani gangs. Why aren't they equally irate about the church abuse? And I thought, really? We aren't importing boatloads of priests and vicars over the channel, This is what gets me. It's still going on. We're importing these people still, and still every day. And we now have the link between illegal immigration and the rape gangs as well. And every day we're importing more. Imagine importing boatloads of serial killers into this country. For some reason, why this doesn't get picked up by the media. The News at 10, most disgracefully, the day before Dame Casey's report came out, BBC One, News at 10, did a deep dive into the grooming gangs, and the reporter went and spoke to one of the survivors, and I thought, finally, mainstream, here we go. And she said, oh yes, my perpetrators, and it was 3 white men.
Yeah.
And I thought, there we go, 24 hours before the report's going to say it's illegal immigration, and it's Pakistani, many of whom are legally, and the BBC has to try to deflect onto white people. The odious Emily Maitlis, again speaking to Dame Casey, this woman who was angrily speaking to Rupert Lowe, saying, how dare you link this? You'd have think should have shown some humility and apology, and then yet again refused to do that. And unfortunately, the public as a whole needs to have access to the sort of things we're talking about.
So basically, the upshot of what you're saying is that the media are doing their job effectively, so that the level of anger never quite reaches what it should.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. They're still doubling down, aren't they? Some people, they were, as I said, they're still focusing on the fact that we've got to make sure that people aren't racist, and that the whole point of the grooming gangs, the thing that we've discovered is that people didn't report these crimes because they were scared of being called racist, and they're still saying that. The media are still saying, we've got to make sure that we're not racist to this particular group. So they're still perpetuating the very thing that caused it.
And hats off, obviously, to Charlie Peters at GB News and everything they've done. But, even before GB News was founded, we had this channel. We were talking about this issue. James Delingpole raised it on the BBC and was never again seen on the BBC. And, of course, Tommy Robinson. His entire raison d'etre was this sole issue. It wasn't about racism. It was about the plight of white young girls. And look, what the treatment that happened was meted out to him after all of this.
Well, with Tommy Robinson, he did a little piece for X, for Twitter, as it was, which to me had the absolute right level of sheer anger. And he just very articulately went to every single point. And I thought, that you are absolutely, it's undeniable. You are entirely correct.
What's amazing, when you look at his interview, his Newsnight interview that he did with Jeremy Paxman in 2011, he's basically saying what this report says. He's saying, look, it's predominantly Pakistani men. And Jeremy Paxman keeps saying, are you saying that white people don't commit these crimes? Isn't it also white people? And he's saying, yes, but it's predominantly this group, and he has been kind of, the enemy of the state for over a decade. And now a report comes out that basically says that he was right.
And if you look at that interview from 2011, I'm sure you're familiar with it, the kind of, absolute condescension of Jeremy Paxman, this kind of, you look at him and you think, you popinjay, you stupid, man, preening man. He literally is holding his nose.
Yeah.
Are you seriously suggesting? He's sort of saying this. And I think when you look back, Tommy Robinson was, obviously you could tell, very young. He really kept his cool and just kept on going on and on and on. So good for him on that front. But I think, you mentioned Maitlis, and this kind of, the way she actually went for Rupert Lowe and said, that's because maybe you're a racist, and you sort of think, you would cover everything to do with Me Too, you would believe all women, all of that stuff. When it comes to this, though, somehow you want to throw shade on it. You want to throw you want to destabilise. You want to somehow or other make people feel less sure. And to be angry, you have to be quite sure and certain.
It is these types of women I have the most contempt for.
Yes,
to say.
yes.
Emily Maitlis. It's Jess Phillips, who vetoed Oldham Council's request for a national inquiry, and then had the gall on television the other day to say, oh, no, I wasn't involved in any cover-up or anything else. And people like Lucy Powell, who stood up in the House of Commons and said this is the dog whistle politics. And these are the first people to say that they are the champions of women's rights, they are the Me Too movement. Well, I'm sorry, that applies everywhere except, the one thing that trumps women's rights apparently is the Muslim card, unfortunately, especially when your majority is hanging on the Muslim vote. And I think it's such a disgraceful display. It's so ignoble and dishonourable. And if I were the Prime Minister, I would hope that after this inquiry, these people would be fired from their jobs, actually.
Quite.
That's beyond his control. That's Lucy Powell and Jess Phillips.
Yes. You mentioned there, about the media basically still trying to kind of, weaken resolve in this area by the way that they present it. The reason I asked that was that what people or friends of mine have said from outside this country looking in is, what is the matter with you? Why aren't you actually even protesting?
Yeah.
And, you sort of think, absolutely, I'm sorry, there is a difference between traditionally left and right when it comes to, protesting and going out on demos. And there is this fear all the time that somehow you're going to be, linked with the far right and all of that. But haven't we got to lose those inhibitions? Haven't people got to become visible in their anger? At the moment, it's just in people's sitting rooms.
Yes, you say there's a difference between left and right. I don't think that's it, because we've seen unrest in Liverpool, for example, haven't we? And you remember they tried to call the Liverpool residents who rose up over migrant hotels far right. Now, calling anybody in Liverpool far right is nonsensical. But why did the Liverpudlians rise up? Because they've got a strong Irish streak in them, I think this is it. And what we've seen in Ireland are the Irish people taking to the streets much more regularly and proportionately in much larger numbers than we've seen in this country. And I think it's something to do with the English character, the English nature. I'm not including Scotland, because, of course, Scotland doesn't have many immigrants in Scotland, so it's not an issue for them. And I think that's the problem. The French are always revolting, as we like to say. The Irish do it. And there's something about the English character which we do need to shake off. But as we've said many times, what is it going to take? It didn't take the Manchester Arena bombing, hasn't taken the Southport affair. I don't think this is going to be enough either. I rather despair at times as to what it's going to be to wake us up out of this.
Yes, I mean, just simple peaceful demonstration, or to be outside places, to be outside things, just in the same way that these other people do. People are enemy. They do this.
I think it's years of demoralisation and propaganda to make us feel that if we protest about things happening in our country, we're racist or we're whatever. And I also think there's a big class divide in England, that this has happened to working class people. The girls were all working class. And I just think, the middle classes don't want to have anything to do with them. The Westminster bubble just don't care. And there is this huge separation between those groups of people, probably to do with Brexit. That was a big divide. And I think the middle classes feel like the working classes let them down on Brexit, and so they choose the doctrine of multiculturalism over, their own people.
Yes.
And of course, if the government ever finally got its act together and began doing mass deportations akin to what Trump is doing in America, those same Pippers and Tarquins who are doing Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion will be doing everything they can to protect those people from being deported. Yet when it happens to young white girls who are being raped, they're completely silent.
Yes. I think something has got to happen that makes anger more visible. I just think
peacefully, of course.
Oh yes, I'm talking about in the same way that when you think of those huge Gaza demonstrations, 300,000. Okay, there have been the kind of Tommy Robinson demonstrations, but actually, I'm not trying to minimise, but they are smallish. They tend to be quite small. You need big demos, and you've got to have people saying, "We don't care what you say. We don't care if you're going to call us far right."
And there needs to be pressure within institutions to talk about this issue. If you work for a university or the NHS or anything, you'll get emails about Gaza and Palestine or Black Lives Matter, or talk to us if you're experiencing racism. When has there ever been any kind of campaign or training around grooming gangs? When has it been promoted? When have you seen a poster saying, "Are you affected by grooming gangs? Call this number." You don't see anything like that. So I think I would hope that I don't don't know if this is possible, if anyone could do it, but within institutions, there needs to be people speaking up. But I suspect people are too scared to. But there needs to be something like that. When you see that visibility, you see Palestine and trans and everything visible in our institutions, but there needs to be some recognition of what, the trauma that's tens of thousands, maybe even more, girls have been through, and it is a national, scandal that so many people must be affected by.
Yes. Actually, the general subject of women and migration and the threat that's posed to women by migration has come up again. Actually, before, because there's some new stats on this, isn't there, Ray? But also, Louise Casey did say that the live cases that she was looking at about, grooming gangs actually did involve foreign nationals, asylum seekers.
And asylum seekers, yeah.
I.e. people that, we might have seen coming on the boats last year, this year. Oh, it's extraordinary. But this is some work that's been done by the Centre for Migration Control, isn't it? This is about the level of crime and its links to migration, isn't it?
Yes, it's been reported in the Telegraph and elsewhere that, according to this research done by the Centre for Migration Control, 26% of sexual assaults in Britain are committed by foreign nationals. Now, the problem is, of course, we don't have in this country the sort of data you have in places like Denmark and so forth. Robert Jenrick is trying to force a vote in the House of Commons to make it a legal requirement for all police forces and for the criminal system to record the ethnicity, birthplace, visa status, and route of entry into this country as well. So we finally will have proper access to all this information. Personally, I think 26% is an underestimate. I think it's higher. It's higher than that, because also I'm not sure whether this foreign national includes people who've got a British passport but originally arrived here as foreign nationals. Also, it won't include, for example, the children of foreign nationals. People who are, many of the Pakistani rape gangs, for example, are British born and bred. So they are Pakistani heritage, but they have a British passport. So I think there's a much larger issue here, added to which, of course, when we say 26% of foreign nationals are committing these crimes, it's primarily foreign nationals from certain areas. And so in terms of the proportionality here, we know, for example, it's Pakistan, it's Somalia, it's Eritrea, basically it's North Africa and the Middle East, plus Bangladesh and Pakistan. These are the trouble spots. And these are the people, of course, who are the ones coming over in vast numbers. And, as Donald Trump Jr. said, if I give you a bowl full of M&Ms or Smarties, as we would call them, and told you 2 or 3 of them are poison, would you take a handful? Well, more than 2 or 3 of them are poison, and we're still welcoming these numbers over. But this is not new stuff. Years ago, I looked into police stats and prison populations in this country, and it was strikingly clear to me that there are certain ethnicities who commit certain types of crime more. So black people commit more violent crime and robbery and drug offences. Asians commit more, or South Asians commit more sexual offences. East Asians, Chinese and Japanese, commit more white-collar crime and fraud. And white people tend to commit more antisocial behaviour and arson and some types of theft. And if you think about it, all of that seems instinctively obvious. We understand the cultures involved here, and that all makes sense. But why we can't actually speak openly about these things, I find remarkable. It's things like this inquiry that are making people more aware of this. But we had this excellent. People must watch our documentary for NCF Heresies with Alex Phillips. There's been a quadrupling of rape in this country in the last 10 years, which has mirrored the rise of the immigrant population. And in places like Paris, 77% of sex crimes in Paris, we know, are also foreign nationals.
Actually, you produced that documentary, didn't you?
Yeah, and what's come out of this recent data is similar to what we found in the documentary. So this recent data shows that it's primarily Indians who are committing, of that 25%, it's primarily Indians, then Romanians, Pakistanis, and then Afghanistanians. And that is a similar picture across Europe that we found when we made that documentary, that high rates of Afghanistani people, Pakistani people, and Indian people, and then some aspects of Eastern European like Romanians and Albanians Palestinians were very high in sexual assault and rape. So it's this data doesn't really come as a surprise. It's the picture of Europe, actually, not just here. And as I was saying about grooming gangs, that's why I think it's so important not just to look at ethnicity, but to look at culture and religion, because we know that these are a lot of these countries are places that are predominantly Islamic, and they hold certain views.
It's Muslim, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Romania, it's the Roma,
Yeah.
so it's not the Romanians who are Slav, it's primarily the Roma who are involved in that, who are the gypsies, essentially.
When you think of that documentary, which was a broad look, at sexual assault and rape, not actually grooming gangs as such, my perception is although people thought the documentary was great, that this has not quite broken through as a major mainstream issue as yet. Would you say?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't know why really. I think it's because the issue of rape is that a lot of rapes don't reach prosecution and they don't, I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's that women are less likely to speak out. I don't know entirely why it hasn't broken through. Like, as you said, the grooming gangs and this issue are entirely related, but the grooming gangs has a separate kind of part, space in people's consciousness as to this general trend, which is what women are experiencing, in this country. And I don't know, women's mental health is really declining. We see rates of, suicidality increasing for all sorts of reasons. Women are having children less, and you do wonder if it's just that if this is a part of that. I'm not saying it's the whole picture, but that women are now in a country that feels totally different to kind of what it was 20 years ago. It doesn't feel as safe. And I don't know. Would you want to raise a family in this country? I just think for women, it's still very difficult to talk about, and I think women more kind of internalise it and
Yes.
direct it at themselves a bit.
But it's more than just sexual assault as well, right? It's shoplifting, it's antisocial behaviour, it's knife crime, it's organised crime. There are corruption. I mean, every crime essentially is related in some way. Now, look, the murder rate's been going down a lot, and people think because the murder rate's gone down that means that Britain's a safer country. The reason that's gone down is most of those things were drunken fights. When the pubs close at 11, people don't drink as much, and so. But you can't just look at that one stat of the murder rate and think Britain must be a better country. Just think if we hadn't had mass immigration and we did have that declining murder rate too, what a wonderful place it would be, because all the other crimes were also evaporating very easily. So we would be in a very much, the crime rate today will be drastically lower to what it was 20 years ago without mass immigration.
You mentioned like shoplifting and everything. I read, I think this morning, that one crime that's really taking off is petrol stealing, forecourt, petrol station forecourt stealing.
I hadn't heard of
gone
that.
up
Wow.
exponentially.
And catalytic converters, anybody with a new car. And, I saw a video, chap ran out of his house to accost these four chaps, and they just told him, get back into your house. Right? These are organised criminal gangs. They've got machetes and everything else. You're in your pyjamas. What can you? And you're helpless. And if you phone the police, nothing's going to happen. It's a terrible state of affairs.
And bikes being stolen in London. I know someone who rides their bike and they've caught people soaring through the lock, multiple occasions. That they now use two locks, so that if they catch them, there's still time before they cut through the other lock. I mean, it's crazy.
And what we know, of course, is there's only a very few number of people who are actually doing a lot of those sorts of things, the phone thefts and everything else. And if there was a proper clampdown by the police, I think in one swoop they got 10% of the people who do those sorts of things. So,
Amy, you mentioned there, about would women want to bring in a family up in this country? They feel it's not the same. I have to say, this week I had one of those long, dark nights of the soul about this country. And that was actually because of this quite extraordinary abortion vote, when I really did think we are really plumbing depths now in this country. What was your feeling about it?
Yeah, to me it feels like I don't recognise the country anymore. To me it feels very, very un-British. I'm aware that places like Canada have very liberal abortion limits, right up till birth. And I would have said, even several months ago, because I didn't know this was in the pipeline actually, I've only found out about it in recent weeks, I would have said, we'd never do something like that in Britain. We wouldn't go to that extreme.
Amy, do you want to explain precisely what the law was that was passed?
Yeah, so the law was passed to decriminalise abortion up until birth. So prior to that, we had a 24-week limit on abortion, which is still very high compared to other places in Europe. It's one of the highest in Europe. But unlike places like Canada, we wouldn't allow abortion right up till birth. Whereas now you could literally be going into labour. You're about to give birth in, several hours' time. And if you decide to, have some kind of, backdoor abortion or try and DIY abortion, you would not be held accountable and there would be no criminality involved in doing that. You wouldn't. Whereas before, what we've had is in the last 3 years, there's been 6 prosecutions of women that have killed their baby in late-term abortion. And that's actually been an increase in this kind of crime, partly because women weren't having face-to-face appointments for obtaining, pills where they can end their abortion. They were being prescribed online or over the phone, and a lot of women were lying. They were saying, I'm not 24 weeks yet. So the doctors were prescribing these pills, whereas actually they were far longer in their pregnancy. Right. So then they were taking these pills, which carry lots of risks, going to hospital, and then the nurses were realising this woman's taken these pills and she's going to be giving her due dates in a month or so. So this is a crime, and then they were being reported. So it's kind of this issue of women facing the full force of the law was because of this issue around these pills being introduced and the way they were introduced. So to me, the obvious response to that would be to go back to face-to-face appointments where you can check the actual date of the pregnancy and a woman can't lie. But instead, what they've done is they've used this uptake in women doing this as a reason to say, well, we don't want these women to suffer, because they're doing this for a reason. They're often doing it for a serious reason, like they're being abused by their partner and so on, which I don't think is always the case. But, people come out with these emotional narratives. So now we've got to a point quite quickly, there wasn't much of a discussion in Parliament about it, not much of a discussion in the media about it. Just suddenly overnight, I think that to me was partly why it was so shocking, because it just came out of the blue, and you think, gosh, if something like that can happen so quickly, what else can happen so quickly? Whereas we're now where, as I say, if a woman has a DIY abortion, a day before she is due, that's allowed. And it's shocking. It's to me, it's just murder. It's a baby that could live outside of the womb.
And there was cheering. I don't think we do that. There was cheering. They cheered. The MPs cheered when Is this completely cut and dried as yet?
Well, it still has to go to the Lords.
What are the chances there of it being?
Well, I'm not sure what the chances are in the Lords. But what's fascinating, of course, is we often speak. What is the story of the past 20 years, 25 years? Is the disconnect between the public and our elites and our political class. As I often like to say, the average British voter is to the right of the average Tory MP on immigration. But the same thing applies to this issue. So polling has shown that only 3% of women support this idea of having abortion up to the late stage. So when there's only 3% of women, and when it ranks bottom of the list of 50 priorities given to the British public, why on earth is there this huge rush? And let our viewers know this was not some narrowly won victory. This was, I think, 2/3, 3/4 of the MPs voted this way. I think only 8 Tory MPs did, but there aren't many of them around. It was a huge number who voted for this piece of legislation. And where does this end? We're talking about a piece of skin, maybe 1 centimetre or 2 centimetres between the baby and the real world. So why, once the baby is born, what's the difference between killing it after it's born? That doesn't make any logically, there's no difference between 5 minutes ago and 5 minutes after birth. Deeply worrying, and of course we just seem to be in this nihilistic death spiral of legislation this week, with the euthanasia coming out as well. And it's this is often what civilizations that have reached their peak and are in their own death throes obviously often becomes nihilistic.
Well, I think I've said this before on the show, but these things which are the great liberal shibboleths, if you like, these great test cases of abortion, in America particularly, euthanasia. Also the complete and utter obsession with non-heterosexual relationships. They're all about, society not going on in their odd ways. They're all about, new generations not being born. But there was something about this that really kind of shook me. You said I'm British. I just didn't recognise. I couldn't recognise the people who would actually put this through.
No.
I just thought, well, this can't be happening in this country.
Well, we have people like Stella Creasy now in Parliament who it's hard to think of. Well, actually, the list's getting quite long of people I've called odious today, but she certainly deserves ranking up there.
Yeah. And as you say, it was slipped under. There's no question about it. No one really knew that it was happening.
No, it was just so shocking how quickly it was. Such a big change to the way we view life and pregnancy and babies. It's huge. And I mean, I even think this assisted dying bill, to me that even feels a little bit rushed. But abortion compared to that, it's just sort of gone through. And I am still in shock actually about it. And we moan about the Tories, but I don't think this would have happened under a Tory government. It's Labour that have pushed for this because they are so obsessed with rights, women's rights and the rights of the
except for the rights of a child,
of the unborn child. Yeah,
because I've never sort of when it comes to abortion, I'm kind of classic in that sense. I sort of think. Obviously, you've got to have necessary evil, you've got to have it, but somehow it should always be, always erring on the side of caution and concern. That has gone entirely, obviously, out of the window now. Anyway, terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible, no question. We're going to carry on talking a little bit, but in the meantime, I know it's ending on rather a duff note, but fact is, that's reality at the moment. Amy, thank you very, very much. Well, thank you very, very much. And we shall see you next week. Okay, bye. Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programmes, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals program, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.